All right. Hard to believe it's already week 13. Next week is the final. And that's it. We're done. You guys get how many weeks off? Like 3 weeks off before the next semester? It's about 3 weeks. Which I imagine you'll enjoy the break. I imagine everything is due this week or next week? This week? Yeah.
I mean,
My stuff's not due till next week, but yeah, that's not so bad. So today, I don't know how fast today might go. It might go pretty fast. Just because we're just wrapping up with some of the stuff that we were doing with the API stuff. Then we're going to do a little review, which you guys are actually going to power because it'll be things that you want to know before the test for next week. We can cover over the small things that maybe you're still struggling with. And then after that, we're going to call it a night, and that'll be it. And then next week will be the final. So the final will be 3 hours. It's not going to have any multiple choice section to it. It'll be all practical, 3-hour practical. I'm going to try to make it like 40 minutes worth of stuff, but 40 minutes to me might not be 40 minutes to you. So it'll be hard to say how that goes down. Hopefully you'll have more than enough time to complete it. I'm thinking I'm just going to do the same thing that I did in the midterm. Basically, there'll be step 1, you complete step 1, move on to step 2. Keep going about that route. Somebody asked me on Tuesday whether or not I'm going to require that the whole thing parse. No, I'm not. So if sections of it don't parse, that's not a big deal. What you should be doing, though, when you're writing out the test is open up your console, take whatever it is you're working on, throw it in the console, check that it works, and then paste it back in or whatever, okay? So just kind of keep track that at least some of your stuff executes, because I'm going to write a parser that will go through and it will literally take step 1 and it will parse it and execute it. I'm going to look at your return and I'm going to look at, I'm going to run some regular expression against it and make sure that you have some of the pieces that you need to have. And as long as it's good, you'll get the mark for the full mark for it. So yeah, you do want to make sure at least, some of your questions parse, okay? But if your whole file doesn't parse, don't worry, you're not going to get nailed with some, nasty mark or anything for it. That being said, the way the test questions will likely be set up, it will have something like, I'm not sure if I'm going to do step or question. I might do question. It'll probably be something like, that's Ruby. I code in like 6 languages a day. It'll be like this, and then it'll be like question number 1, and it'll probably be begin or start or something like that, okay? You will write your stuff in here, and then at the bottom, it'll be that word, right? And what I'm going to ask that you do, just to make my life simpler, is don't take the comments out. Leave the comments, write your answer inside there. It makes it a lot easier for me to parse, seeing as how I'm doing you a solid and letting you do your assignment and not having it required to be handed in till the 17th, right? That's a pretty awesome due date. Considering all the marks have to be on the 19th. Kind of fucked myself over, but whatever. Promise is a promise. So if you do me a solid and don't delete the comments, it'll be nice and easy for me to mark them.
So, depending on the question, we'll be answering in the same comment?
Yeah, you'll be answering inside the block.
Okay.
Yeah, so it'll have like question 1, end. Inside, though, there might be like, I don't know, like part A and part B kind of thing. So that it's easier for you to follow, like I usually do. If I say write a function and then in the body do these things, I always kind of walk you through the whole process. So yeah, it'll have like things like that. But the big thing is just don't delete these 2 parts, because then I can kind of take the question, build like a regular expression answer key to it, and I can mark them nice and easily. Make my life a little easier, make marking 82 of them go a lot faster. So it'll definitely be worth the while. All right, any questions about the test next week? It's worth 20%. So they're kind of hefty. I'm not sure how all of you did on your midterm, but if you If you failed, nobody really like drastically failed the midterm, somewhere below the 50 point, but nobody was like, well, there was zeros, but that's because they didn't show up. So what the hell am I supposed to do about that? But like nobody was like way, way low. So that one was worth 20% as well. I think on average, the average person is sitting at about, there's some people around 50. The average person is sitting around 80. So hopefully you're not in a bad situation. If you are, this test is going to add 20% to your grade. So if you come in and you like nail it, then knock it out of the park, then you can just take whatever grade you currently have and add 20% to it. And that's basically what will happen. As for the marks, all of the marks will be done by Sunday. So I'll have all the assignments marked, all the labs that are currently handed in. Everything you have handed in will be marked by Sunday. So if you're missing things or you want to add things, go ahead and add them through. If you want to be able to see that final mark by Monday morning or whatever, I recommend handing it in over the week. That's no pressure though. You have till the 17th to get everything in, get all your labs in and everything else. So there's no pressure, okay? But if you want to see that upgraded mark so you know how badly you need to tackle this test, and you want to be strategic about it, then yeah, make sure you get everything handed in because it will be guaranteed to be marked by Monday. Any questions? No? Cool. All right, so last week we talked about JSON and APIs. JSON is data structures, just like XML. The two things are different, though. They're similar in the fact that they're both data structures. XML is, even if you haven't really worked with XML, maybe you haven't attached to an API that delivers back XML, you'll be surprised because you actually have coded XML and maybe not even realized it. If you've done any HTML, you have worked with XML because HTML is an XML-based language. So it's not a scary thing. In regards to the test, I'm not going to ask you to do anything in XML at all. Just be aware that the thing exists. When you go out into the wild blue yonder out there on your co-ops, especially if you're working with like legacy APIs, because some old legacy APIs will deliver back XML instead of JSON. That being said, though, there's so many tools for parsing through XML and JSON as objects. It's not even funny. Somebody was using the $parse XML. Was it you? No, it wasn't you. I can't remember who it was. Somebody was using jQuery. In jQuery, they have a function. It's just it's on the $, and it's parse XML, and then it takes an XML string, and it returns back an object, like an object literal from JavaScript that you can work with, just the same as if you're doing JSON. The only cool thing about JSON, though, when we actually fetch and we get back the JSON block, it comes back to us as native JavaScript, which means we can work with it right away without having to parse it or do any other intermediary steps. We can just work with it immediately, which is pretty cool. JSON is also faster because it's smaller, right? Especially when you start gzipping them and all that wonderful stuff, compressing them up. They get even smaller, which makes them a lot more transportable and generally quicker for your application. And because it's JavaScript, makes life nice and easy because if you're using a framework like Express or React or whatever, and all you're dealing with is JavaScript, both front and back end, that's much easier to work with. It's much easier to scale, and it's a lot easier to hire for as well if you're not dealing with a whole bunch of different programming languages and you're only working with one. So makes your life a lot simpler. Yeah, so when working with JSON, we have a few data types that we work with. We have 5 data types. Actually, there's 6. I don't have the 6th one in there. Strings, integers, floats, arrays, other objects as well, but also Booleans, right? You can also put true and false inside there as well. They work. JSON uses 2 major operators when building out the JSON structures. Does anybody remember what those are? There's 2 major operator pairs that we use. Any idea? Nope. One is for representing objects. What's the operators we usually use to represent objects? Wow, you're an interactive bunch today. Curly braces.
Everyone's just kind of burnt out.
That's totally fine then. All right, I'll talk. So curly braces, or the Alfred Hitchcock brackets, I call them, because they look like Alfred Hitchcock a little bit. These usually are used for objects in like literally almost every single language, except for like PHP, which refuses to embrace objects that way. But yeah, so curly braces, and then for arrays, just square brackets, right? Those are the only two real operators you have to worry about. There's no math operations. There's nothing like that in JSON. You only have curly braces and arrays. But these things can be nested, right? Like, so you can have multiple levels of arrays and objects inside your JSON structure. And then after that, it's just the data types. That's really all that matters. Yes, Alex?
Just curious, what's the most layered object that you've ever dealt with?
The most layered object I've ever dealt with? I will show you. This thing's a it's basically an order snapshot. So we built this big platform for a company called Distributors. And when you do sales, because of the GDBP, do you guys know what that is, the GDBP? So it's the new privacy policy for Europe. When Europeans order from sites and you deliver and sell to Europeans, or you're doing anything with Europe, you have to consider the GDBP, which means if they want you to remove their information, you have to be able to purge their information. The problem with that is it's everything connected to them. So their address information, their credit card information, all that stuff, right? So if you think about a relational database, you guys are doing relational databases right now, aren't you?
Advanced databases.
Yeah, advanced databases, cool. So you'll totally appreciate this then. So you have a user, right? A user can have multiple orders, right? So here we go. So one user can have multiple orders, right? An order will have likely one payment, right? But this user can have multiple payments, right? So you have this kind of structure. Orders will likely be connected to products and blah, blah, blah. It doesn't really matter after that point. The order, this part here, doesn't really require this person. It only requires this person when they want to pay for it, when we want to ship it, when we want to communicate with them about their orders, anything basically communication-wise with the user, then I need to know, their order connection. But when it comes to reporting, and I want to report on an order, I don't really need to know much about who the user is. Unless I'm getting into things like all sales in Ontario, right? Then I kind of need to know at least some generic address information. Anyways, because of this whole GDBP thing, if I have to purge them from the system, I lose this, and I lose this, which means I only have this left over, and it's not connected to anything, which makes it a little difficult for reporting. So we created something called an order snapshot, which allows us to snapshot a whole block of the order, which looks like this. Where are you? Order snapshot. Come on. So here we go. This data object here gets stored in the database as JSON and looks basically like a big JSON string. So there's our order ID. That comes down to our billing address. There's all our billing address information. There's the shipping address information. Get into transactions, coupon codes.
And those are all objects.
These are all objects or arrays of objects. Yep. This one's really cool. Profit leads down to who the role is associated with the profit. That gets down into the totals, the percentages, and it stores all the profit information. If we get into the role, then we drill down even further. Users, so there's your user, your ID, your primary address, and then that drills down into your address information. Carts, go to cart products, go to products, and then there's the product details as well. You can get nested pretty far. Gshift has some that are probably about 10 levels deep before you get back out again. Yeah, it just depends. You can pretty much nest as deep as you want until you run out of memory, right? Your JSON object can be as big as it needs to be. You just need to be careful, though, because if you're storing large JSON objects into the database, you have to be cautious that you don't run out of memory when you're pulling them out to do things with them, because you do only have so much memory on a machine, right? And when you're working with like remote systems and you're trying to run kind of lean, you might throw 8 gigs on a virtual machine, and you don't want to reach through the capacity of what your 8 gigs gives you.
What happens if you reach past a machine's memory? Does it just truncate it?
No, you get Stack Overflow or the thing crashes or something like that. Yeah, unfortunately it doesn't just, well, some systems might truncate, but no. Usually you'll reach past and it will just blow up.
Could you write it in such a way that it would truncate it? Like, while it's not the best, it's better than crashing?
The better method is to do what's called streaming, which is where you basically, you work with the object stream instead. So you say, I want all of these objects over here, but do not pull them all into memory. Just give me one through the stream at a time. So you process it and then you feed it back into something else, and that's called streaming. If you take the C++ course in the summertime, you'll learn about streams and how to work with streams, and it's applicable to every language as well as databases as well. So yeah, there are ways to deal with that. It's rare, unless you're working with large enterprise type systems where there's tons of data. And our data, like for example, our search engine result pages, we basically go out, we take a keyword that you've put into the system and we go scrape it from Google, and we bring back the first 50 search results for that keyword, and we store that into Mongo. When we do that though, some people have 13,000 keywords, 13,000 times 50, and we go grab all of that and bring it back. So when you're working through memory and trying to build aggregate information on that, you can run out of memory. So we have streams and stuff like that that we work with to help make that not happen.
Would that be similar to how search engine works then?
Yeah, search engine's not much different. They're doing the same thing. Like, the Google's in petabytes, probably higher actually, in memory streams.
Whenever you access their webpage.
No, because you're only accessing a subset, right? You're only getting a small amount of it. That's why it's paged, right? Yeah, could you imagine if you just typed in the letter A and hit enter and it just returned every single search result it possibly had? You'd blow out your memory, guaranteed. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So, anyways, these are made up of objects and arrays. The difference really between an object and an array, as you know, with any language that you work with, an array is a list, right? It's a list of items. In JavaScript, actually in a lot of languages that are loose typed, or duck typed, right? You guys know what duck typed is? I think I told you once before. If it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it must be a duck. The whole idea is that that's implicit typed or implicitly typed, which means when you assign a string to a variable, it knows it's a string. You don't have to say type string. It's like, I already know that's a string. We're good, right? If you assign a number to it, it's like, I know it's a number. It's implicitly typed or duck typed. Anyways, with these, we have the ability to create objects with any type of value. The only real rule we have is that these keys need to be unique within the scope, right? The second you drill down a level, you can start all over using the same keys again. It's totally fine because it's within the actual scope. But those keys have to be unique. Arrays don't have keys because they're lists. They're technically keyed. They're keyed by index numbers, right? So 0 through to whatever however many list items you have. Whereas these are kind of word indexed. That should be not new by the looks of it. So we basically built out a massive JSON string. Then we connected to Netlify. We loaded all of our products up onto Netlify on a JSON address. I think we did get to the end where we actually fetched it. Yeah, we fetched it. Did we not? And then we populated the other thing with our JSON data. The only other piece that we talked about that was kind of odd was the CORS. We talked a little bit about the issues with CORS, Cross-Origin Resource Sharing Standard. Essentially, the idea is that when we go to request resource information, our browser is expecting a certain set of headers to come back from the server. If they're weird or there's something wrong with them, it won't allow us to do it. Plus, the server also has to permit us accessing the resource. Not a big thing that you need to remember. It's not going to be on the test. Just be aware of it when you guys are going out into your co-ops. And you will very likely be working with APIs. If you're working on the APIs and you're on the server side, you're not going to hit a CORS error because it's in your browser. It's actually a part of your browser's software. So you likely won't hit it. But if you hit it on the front end, because you're doing a fetch request on the front, then at least you kind of know where to start and where to look for. If it's not your server that you're trying to access the data, you're screwed. You hit the CORS thing, you might as well just move on and go find something else to do because you can't do anything about it. Unless you can convince the person on the server to give you open-ended permission. That's just the way that goes. We added the new tool Netlify to your belts. So now you've got Netlify to work with. We talked a little bit about HTTP verbs. This little section of HTTP verbs will likely be on the test. It'll just be like a quick little blurb about it. What else? We fetched. I think that was about it. Yeah, and then we went through and we actually worked with some of the data that we did in here. We replaced this H2 element with Bob's Bait and Tackle Shop. We spit out the slogan. We iterated through the products using a for loop, or a for of loop, I believe. And that was basically where we finished. And now we are ready to do Lab 7, which we're going to do together, which is cool. So once we have all of our JSON data, learning to work with JSON data is pretty fun. And what I decided to do for Lab 7, I did this on Tuesday and it worked out pretty well. We basically just won it. We created a website. We used the data to populate the page, which gave everybody the experience of working with data. Also helped refresh your memories on how to create elements, how to access elements on the page, all that type of stuff. And we did it from scratch. Like, we created the HTML page from scratch. We fetched the data from scratch. We built the CSS from scratch with input. I don't know how inputful you guys are going to be, but we did input. It looked like it totally looked like ass, but I'll show it to you. I'll show you Tuesdays. Let me just, oops. I have a new, whatchamacallit key, SSH key for work, and work's pretty specific that we have to passcode our SSH keys. So every time I open up my terminal, I have to type in my stupid passcode, and it takes forever. All right, I just boot up. There we go. Live server. Oh, live server, not libs server. And that's basically what we built in the span of like an hour. We didn't actually get to complete it, which kind of sucked because we had a lot more to complete from the week prior. So we didn't get to add in like the featured section, which kind of stunk because we were using the SKU as a way to connect back to our products, so they didn't get really to see that. But it's okay because the recording that I did on Tuesday didn't work, failed. So they're going to rely on today's recording, and we get to do more stuff, which is pretty cool. And hopefully that'll also work as a review. In addition to that, if you have any questions during the course of this class about, callbacks, what else? Objects, prototyping, any of that type of stuff, we can do that at the same time. So don't feel, don't be scared. Feel free to call out, ask, whatever. We'll take a break likely at 5, and then we'll probably power through the last part of it, and then hopefully we'll end early. That'd be nice, eh? Yeah. Any questions before we start? No? Alex.
Where are we getting those starters?
No starters.
No starters yet?
No starters. We're literally doing this from scratch, like right from the get-go. We're going to create an HTML page and all this wonderful stuff. So why don't we start that? So I'm going to close off my browser, close off my folder. I'm going to leave my live server running. I'm going to open up a folder. I'm just going to put it on my desktop. You can put it literally wherever you want. That's totally up to you. I created a folder called Bob's Thursday. I'm going to take my IDE, stick it on the left side here. I'm going to pull Bob's Thursday into my IDE. And I have no files in there yet. That's what I'm starting with. Just a blank, empty folder with no files. So you can do the same. Just create a blank, empty folder with no files. And then I'm going to open up Bob's Thursday on my inside my browser using live server. So if you're using live server, you can connect to it right away. Otherwise, you're going to have to wait for the first file, which will be our index file. All right. So every website, we require one file. At least at the very minimum, we have to have at least one file in order to have our website displayed to the internet. Does anybody know what that file needs to be? Index. That's right. So we're going to create a new file. Name it however you want. No, I'm just kidding. Call it index.html. And I mean, we're going to be very lazy programmers. We're going to add in the basics, and then we're definitely dropping Bootstrap in there. We'll drop Font Awesome in there and make our lives very easy. Okay? That way we can piece it together pretty fast. Kind of interested in how this one's going to look because the other one looked very different. So look more financial and less Bob's Bait and Tackle Shop, that's for sure. All right, so I'm just going to close off my sidebar so that I can just see the index page. And I'm going to create first the doc type. Doc type. I think I'm doing this wrong. I think it's doc. There we go. I don't know if I need to write doc type space HTML. Sometimes you do. I know, but some people's IDEs don't do it. That's what happened to me Tuesday. I did it on Tuesday, and some people's IDEs weren't doing that, so they had to actually type it all out. So the doc type, I'm sure you guys know what the doc type's for. It tells the browser rendering system what we're actually attempting to render. When you write it like this, does anybody know what that particular doc type means? Yes, it means HTML5. If you look at the HTML 4.1 spec, it's like a much longer thing to do it. HTML5 is nice and clean. Then the next tag we need is obviously an HTML tag, and we need to close it. At the bare minimum, you need a body for your website in order for it to work and be valid in the W3C. A header, though, is nice because the header gives more information to the browser and helps it, know the title of your page and any style sheets you may want to load, any external things you have, content types, that type of stuff. We're going to keep it very basic. We'll just create a head. And inside the head, I'm going to create a title. And we can call it Bob's Bait and Tackle Shop. And now I should be able to refresh my page. Yep, sure enough, I get Bob's Bait and Tackle Shop on the tab. So if you did that correctly, you'll have Bob's Bait and Tackle Shop sitting up on the tab of your page. After that, I'm just going to create the body tag. And I'm going to create actually no, just going to create the body tag. So I want to load in Bootstrap. I don't think, I did on Tuesday, I loaded in jQuery and all the JavaScript for it, but it's not necessary because we're only using the CSS. We're not going to build any modals. We're not going to use any of the component functionality that's built into Bootstrap's JavaScript library. So I think we'll just get the style sheet stuff that we need. And I like to put my style sheets above my title. I don't know why. It's not really going to make a big difference. I just that's what I like to do. So I'm going to create a comment, and I'm just going to say third-party style sheets. That way I can just kind of say this is my section of stuff. And then I'm going to head over to the internets, and I'm going to type in Bootstrap CDN, and hopefully my first option will be the bootstrapcdn.com, which looks like this, bootstrap CDN.com. This is a cool site because it doesn't just have Bootstrap on it. There's also Font Awesome. I think it's got Foundation. It's got a few different ones on it. Just in case you were curious what a CDN is, it stands for Content Delivery Network. Basically, instead of you having to pull the library down and add it into your folder, you're linking to it instead. So obviously, if you lose internet access, which may have happened to you if you've been using any of my stuff and you've tried to open it up and your internet has gone out in the house, you won't get any styles. Things will just blow up because it can't connect through the CDN to go grab the content and bring it back. Or you'll get a cached version of it. That also happens. But once you go to the Bootstrap CDN, the first page has Bootstrap right on it. We only want the CSS. If you click the little arrow, what's cool is it already has some filled out templates for the link tags. So the top one is just standard HTML. The next one is Pug, which is like a templating system for Node Express on the back end. And then there's Haml, which is used in like Ruby. You can use Haml in a lot of different things, actually. I used to use PHP Haml. We're going to use HTML. And all you have to do is click the link, and it'll immediately copy to the clipboard. And then you can just paste it in place and save it. And now you've got Bootstrap. Yeah, yes. I think for now we'll just start with Bootstrap. I was going to add in, what the hell's it called? Font Awesome, but I don't know if we'll get to using Font Awesome. So right now we'll just use Bootstrap. And we're ready to start. So if we want to know for sure that Bootstrap is working, we should try to attempt to use a element from Bootstrap. So I'm going to try the Jumbotron. That's what I used on Tuesday. That's what created the blue border at the top, was using a Jumbotron. So why don't we try a Jumbotron? But before we do that, let's do something a little different. We'll use a div. Actually, let's call our div. Yeah, we'll use a div. And we'll give it a class. Oops. We need to put the class inside the tag. Class of container. And what that's going to do is it's actually going to create a container inside our page of about 15 pixels on each side, which means our content will be in the middle, more so. Not the whole width of the page. Now inside there we can work with that and we can actually create our header. So let's create a header in there just to be nice and cool with our HTML5. Letting the Googles know that this is our header of our page. And we'll do an H1 tag in there. And for now, I'm just going to write company name because we're going to populate all the actual text in these things with our, what's it called? JavaScript instead. Now, it's not a Jumbotron yet. It won't be a Jumbotron until we add the class of Jumbotron, right? Sounds like a pudgy transformer. So we'll go to header, and we'll add a class to header, and just write Jumbotron. And if you do that, it will wrap the header in this little gray box. Now that's really sketching out my OCD here. I want to move it down a little bit. It's not balanced properly on the page. So the cool thing about cool thing about Bootstrap 4 is we actually get these little like margin helpers and padding helpers so that we don't have to litter them inside of our style sheet. We can actually move things up and down on the page using the margin and padding helpers. And the way they work, it's kind of interesting. So for margin, it's M, right? And if you just do M and any number from 1 to 5, it will move, I believe it's M's, like EMs. It will move 1 to 5 EMs up, down, and left and right at the same time. If you want to go only up and down, it's MY and any of these things. That will add margin to the top and bottom. If you only want to add it to the top, it's MT, and to the bottom is MB. I'm sure you can guess left and right? L and R. And that's it. That's all three of them. If you're trying to add to the left and right, I believe it's MX. We'll add left and right. So it's like X horizontal, Y for vertical. Okay? Padding, same thing, but instead replace with P. And that's padding. So I want to add an M. So I'm going to do M, and I just want to add some to the top. Or I want to add some to the bottom as well. So I'm going to do MY, and probably just a little bit, so I'm going to do -3. Yeah, and it adds just a little bit so it's not sitting there right on the top of the thing. Cool. So that's our company name. Now I want to add their address information. And I think I'm going to add their address information over in like a little block section. Over there. Feel free to give me feedback if you have any opinions on this. I'm going to put their address information in a section. Like so. And then I might move it around with the columns afterwards. And then I'll add an address into it. I could do them as divs. Might be easier to do them as divs or p tags even. Let's add them as p tags because it doesn't really matter. There's no real HTML5 value to it. So I'm going to do street address 1 will be the text inside. And then I'm just going to duplicate that and change it to street address 2. Add another p tag, and inside this one I'm going to put a span in, and I'm going to do city, and then after the span I'm going to add a comma, and then I'm going to do span again, and do province, like so. Maybe I'll make this nested so it's a little easier to read. I think I did this on Tuesday, so there we go. That's a little simpler to read. I'm going to do the same kind of structure again, only I'm going to do span, and I'm going to do country, and then a span, and the postal code. There we go.
What does span do?
Span's kind of like div. It's a meaningless tag basically, but the difference is divs are blocked. So a block element in HTML, if I have a block element, right, like a div, so hold on, I'm gonna get rid of this. I'm gonna run out of Blackboard. Okay, all right, I'm a div. Okay, if I add in another div, right, next to this element, it's gonna go underneath. And that's because it's a block element. It actually has its own margins, own padding, its own space. It takes up its own existence. And this one's a block element as well. So it goes right underneath. Spans are inline elements. So if I have a span, I'm a span, and I add another one, it's just going to go right beside it. I'm a span. That's the difference. But they're just, the cool thing about divs and spans is they have no semantic value. None. So it's not like an H1, it's not like a p tag because it's not a paragraph. It's a meaningless tag that you're able to use that functions as an inline element. And divs are good because they're just block elements, just random block elements that you create. All right, so you'll notice that our address is like butted up to the left part of our screen and isn't abiding to our container, and that's because our container is only wrapping our header. So we should take this div closing tag that's just under the header. I'm going to cut it, paste it below my section closing tag, and tab my section in. That way everything's nicely contained within the container. Also notice I have one space too many. There we go. Company name is a nice elegant font right now. This is using Bootstrap's, I believe it's called Soldier. If you're ever curious what the font is that you're working with, you can always right-click, choose Inspect on an element, and then just scroll through the list real fast, and it will tell you what it is. Seago, right. It's Seago UI is what they're using now. They used to use Helvetica. Used to be what they used. Then they switched it. On Tuesday, we switched it to Consolus from Google's fonts. We'll do that afterwards. We'll go find a font and use it. All right, so we have our address information. Now I'm ready to put something here. I think I might put a featured product here. That makes sense. And then we'll do like a block with our slogan and then the products below. Does that sound cool? I know you really don't give a shit, but does that sound okay? All right, let's do it. Okay, so section. Why don't we add a class to it? Because I want to create a column so that it kind of stays, the address stays where it needs to stay. So we'll add a class. And then Bootstrap's got these cool little column layouts. Every Bootstrap element, when you add a class to it, it gets, if you think of this as being an element, it gets divided into 12 columns. And yes, I'm not going to draw 12 columns, but you get the idea that it gets divided into 12 columns. If you create another object in here, so pretend that's our Jumbotron, it also gets divided into 12 columns, and you can just do that all day long. And keep using these like little subsections of 12 columns. So the way to access those is we write col dash, and if we want to do responsiveness where if the page decreases we move things around, then we can do like SM, MD, or LG, or XL. And there's also XS, which is basically breakpoints in your web page, but I don't really care about that, so we're just going to add 6. And it's going to do a little bit of something. It's going to like push over a little bit. And that's because we're missing one more element. We need to actually, just on the outside of our section, we need to add, we're going to add a div with a class and call it row. And then we're going to tab our whole section in. And now it's nested in that. And it should, if you did it correctly, it will come back up and butt up with the margin line here. Row basically means we're now starting here, no matter what. Even if you have like another col 6, you'll just start immediately here. If you didn't have row, it would come up this side and be now in here, which we're kind of going to do here in a second.
Are you sure you didn't do that just for fun?
What's that?
Row?
Row? I'm not following.
Fish eggs?
Fish? Oh, like row your boat?
No, row. R-O-E.
Row? R-O-E?
Fish eggs.
Fish eggs. I don't fish, man. I don't know. I play a lot of video games, and none of them involve fishing. Yeah. I should fish. Seems like a thing you do when you're 40. You just become a fisherman. You go out and you fish. All right, so I've got my address. I'm probably going to add the feature thing over here, the slogan here, and then our stuff. So I need the slogan in place, but we're also going to need another section. So I'm going to create a section here. I'm going to say section, and this time I'm going to give this an ID. And I'm going to say featured product. Product is a not plural, singular, product. Because we're going to put a featured product over here. I'm going to leave it nice and empty because I'm not going to do anything to it, so I don't even know why I hit enter. I'll just leave it all up on one line because we're going to populate that with JavaScript. I think that's the best way to do that one. So I said we're going to have that up there, and then we're going to do a slogan in the next line, so I'll do that next. So I'm going to do section, ID, and we'll put our slogan in here. And I'm just going to put a filler so I know that there's something in there. I'm going to say my slogan. There we go. And right now you'll notice that it's immediately coming up beside here. I don't want it to do that. So what I'm going to do first is inside the section where it's featured product, I'm going to add a class. And I'm going to say col6. And now slogan will come down to the next line and not be quite in the correct place. And there's two ways I can deal with that. I think I'm going to just cheat and do it the easy way. We're going to say class is equal to col12 for that one. Now it's on its own line and it's taking up all 12 columns, all on its own.
So it tells you how many columns it takes up, not which column it is in.
No, yeah, exactly. It tells you the number of columns. So you can think of it as just a block element that is currently this wide, and this is left justified to the far left side of it. We're going to move it. We're going to move it into the center, and we're going to add some padding and buffering and put it right dead center so it looks nice and that kind of thing. That's what we're going to do. But so after the slogan, we'll have a products section where we actually spit out all the products. So let's add another section. ID. We'll call this products. We'll give it a class, and we'll just make it col12 as well. And that will be where we shove all the products when we iterate through them. And then last but not least, we will have our a footer. Why not, right? We'll put a footer in there. So we'll just say footer. We'll add a p tag in there. And let's just do ampersand copy 2018 and your name. And make sure on the footer I would do class col-12. So it's there. And that's our page in a nutshell. At least the HTML structure for it.
Now, is footer supposed to be in
The container div?
the divs? Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have to do it that way. Actually, I kind of like it when it's not. To do that, we would just copy the footer and cut it out of there.
Not just the container, but the row div as well.
Yeah, no, we're going to take it right out of the container. So in order to do that and follow it so that it's easy to follow, what I like to do is collapse like that so I can see. And then I come down here, not right X, paste it in place, tab everything so it's nice and neat. So this is going to have to become no, it doesn't have to become anything actually. We can take the class off of it now then. There. And if you did it correctly, it'll just butt right up to the edge of the page. It's totally up to you. Like, you have total creative freedom here. You do what you want to do. Now, if I was going to do that, like, the only thing I would say is I would probably put something to offset because it's unbalanced. So there's nothing balancing that in any direction. So if I have this here, it'd be nice to have like a phone number up there or something else, like something create asymmetry of some sort. Or I might put the menu. If I had the menu, I'd do like a full width menu at the top or something like that.
That's just the OCD talking.
It is. Yeah. I don't have a lot of design skill, but I have a little bit. I know what's bad. I know it sticks out like a sore thumb, but. All right, cool. So as far as I'm concerned, we are done for now. Let's take a break for 15 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll add the CSS. When we're done this, all we're going to do is hand in the JavaScript portion of it when we're done. You'll just hand it into Lab 7, and that'll be it. That's all you'll have to do. But yeah, for now, let's take 15 minutes and meet back here at 5:06 or something like that, or 7. We can kind of get this done because I wouldn't mind going a little bit early too. All right, so we might as well add some styles. We'll just put some like rudimentary styles into it. Actually, we can do this in 2 ways. We could add let's do it that way. We'll add the products first, and then we'll do the styling at the end. Okay? That works for me, if that works for you. So to do the products, because the featured product, any sale products, any regular products are all basically the same structure, I don't want to create like little placeholder blocks for every single one of them. I want to do it once. There's an HTML tag that works really good for this that will allow us to create an HTML structure that we can now import into our JavaScript and then populate. Does anybody remember what that tag is called? I want to give a go at it. Starts with a T. No? Template, right? Template. So the template, the HTML template, is used for this exact purpose. It allows us to keep our HTML in our HTML page and not litter our JavaScript with HTML. Now, if you're working with React or Backbone or Angular or what's that other one? It's really big. Ember, Vue, there's a whole bunch of them. The whole idea of keeping your HTML and your JavaScript and your CSS separate is completely thrown on its head because they want everything together as a component so that it can be easily just plugged in anytime you need to add this new feature or whatever. But because we're not building with those actual languages, we're going to try to keep all of our stuff nice and separate. So let's do that now. We're going to create a template. I usually like to create the templates at the very bottom of my page. And it's just template like that. It's usually a good idea to give your template some sort of unique marker. So I'm going to give it an ID. And the ID is literally just going to be product template. Now the template structure inside will be what gets copied. And when it's copied, it will be put onto the page inside that structure. Now we want our products to be able to have their own kind of div level. So we'll create a div inside here. We'll give it a class of product. And I'm giving it a class of product because we're going to have multiple, right? So I can't give it an ID because IDs are supposed to be unique, right? So you don't want to use an ID because that would be incorrect. And then there's a few pieces to this, right? So it's going to have a name. So I'm going to use an H3 for the name. And I'll just populate it with some fluff for now. Product name. I'm going to add a class to this so it makes it very easy to get and call it product name. Just because we're not seeing it, I'm just going to stretch this out a little bit. So that's the product name. I'm going to create another div in here. Give it a class of product details. And then just below that, I'm going to create a p tag. And in there will be the product price. Yeah, product price. And I'll give it a class of product price. Actually, you know what? All of this is inside a class called product, so I'm going to simplify this to name, details, and price. That way it's not so redundant. I like to kind of keep things like this. It's like in SQL, right? You have a table called product, for example, and then in that table you'll have a field, right? And called name. Some people like to take the table name and prefix it on all the field names. So they'd have a table called product, and then they would have a field called product name and product price and product details. And it's kind of redundant because obviously it's product name. It's in the table of products. So it doesn't really make sense to be so redundant. All right, so under the details, I'm going to pop that open. Like so. I need the data. I can't remember all the pieces from the data. Netlify, I think it's this one. Yep, there we go. Let's see. So a product has a SKU, a name. You know what? Why don't we add, just underneath the p tag here, why don't we add another p tag and give it a class, and call it SKU. And inside we'll add a small. Actually, I'm going to put the class on the small, not on the p tag. There we go. There we go. And we'll just call this SKU. And then that will add a SKU to our Bob's Bait and Tackle shop once we actually spit out the product. Now into the product details, we can add the weight and the actual dimensions of our product. So what I'll likely do is just use p tags for that, just to make my life nice and easy. Give it a class of weight. And then I'll use a div, or no, I'll use a p tag as well. Class of dimensions. And then I'm going to open that one. I'm going to create a span. And this will be, which order did I do it in? Width, height? No, height is first. Height. And that will be in centimeters. Width. And length. And there we go. There's our template. And if you don't like that kind of structure, you're welcome to do whatever you want. It's totally up to you. I feel that works. I have a funny feeling this X and the other X, because they don't have spaces beside them, they're going to create an issue where they butt up against the thing. So I'm just going to make sure I put spaces after the X. So that way it'll be like 1 centimeter space X, 2 centimeter space X, 3 centimeter space X. Or no, space X. Okay. Who's still typing? Just so I know. Okay. Give me a few more seconds here. After this, you can go ahead and create a new file called main.js. After that, and we'll use the main.js to do our put in all our JavaScript that we're going to need. And we're going to basically go get our JSON data. But in order to get the JSON data, you obviously need a working JSON feed. So if your JSON feed last week was not working, that's fine. Just use my JSON feed. I'll write it down on the board here once we're done. Actually, while everybody's doing that, I'll write it down now. My JSON feed was at https:// GCS McKinnon, GCS Canon.netlify. .netlify. I should just pay for a domain. .com. Make my life a lot easier. .com/. All right. Week -12. You only need to do this if your JSON did not work. JSON dash, is that appies? Appies and nappies, boys. JSON dash APIS slash, and then it's just data.json. Data.json. There you go. Just a small address.
Just
Takes like
really tiny.
almost 2 boards. Get up and come see if you need it.
I mean, I'm pretty sure there's places that'll shorten that automatically. They'll shorten that and
It's funny that you say that because that's my primary job at GShift right now is working on short URLs. I built a system for short URLs and I work on short URLs. But we can't use that one unless we want to pay $1,000 a month for it. So we could use Bitly.
yeah,
Isn't Bitly free?
I think it is.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's use Bitly. And see. Cool.
Look at that.
Look at that. Do you have to sign up for it, though? I don't know if it works right off the get-go. We'll have to see. I don't know. The Bitly address is Bitly, right? So bit.ly/2rdx 2rdx
Capitalization.
EQB. EQB. That X is capital. All right. I don't know if it'll work though, because it's got to jump twice, right? So we're going through 2 paths. So
Okay.
our request is going to go through the
It
Bitly,
still leads to the same domain.
right? But there's a redirect now, and I'm not sure how that's going to affect the cores. It might cause an issue with the cores if the redirect doesn't wind up working. But anyways, okay. So anybody still writing that out, or are you good? Cool. Let's go ahead and create our main.js file. Whoops. New file, main.js. And I think step 1 will connect and fetch our API data so that we have it. So I'm just going to go, I'm going to write a comment. Zoom in a little bit. Getting our API JSON
Yeah, no.
data.
It goes straight to it.
Did it go straight to it? That's cool. If that's the case, I'm going to use it. There's a little Bitly thing. There we go. I'm going to write it in my file. Why did that? Oh, wow. What is taking up this space over here that it can't go over there?
You probably have,
Just too wide, I guess.
Word wrap on.
I do have word wrap on. I can turn it off.
There you go.
But then it goes off the screen a little bit. I'll just shrink it. There we go. Unnecessary things. All right, let's do a fetch. The fetch will actually retrieve the data. If everything is golden, we won't wind up with a CORS error, okay? So in order to check, the first thing I want to do is store it inside a URL. The URL is not going to change for me, so I'm going to use a constant scope. And I'm going to call it request Yuri equals quotes, the Bitly address, and save it. Okay, so on the final, as I go through this, I'm going to talk about a few different things. On the final, the visibility scope question is definitely going to be on there again. Only this time, if you wrap your scope in a function, I'm not giving you the marks. So don't wrap them in functions. So let's write down what these things are so that we can all kind of remember what they are. So we're going to do var x, let x, const x, and just x. Okay. What is the visibility of var? Is it block scope, functional scope, or global scope? You think var is global?
Constant is global.
What's that?
Function scope.
That's correct. So var is functional scope. What that means is that var is only visible within the function call. When you create a main.js file, as we've done right here, what you don't see is that that whole main.js file is wrapped in a function. You just don't see it, okay? But it is. And because of that, var x is only visible within the function. If you create another function, so for example, if I have function and I write var x, and then I try to access x outside of here, I'll get a reference error. And the reason why I get a reference error is because this is functionally scoped. Okay? The difference between that versus, say, like let, is if I do this will return a reference error. This will return what? It'll return x. And that's because it is functionally scoped, which means only within a function does it maintain its scope. This is not a function, right? And because that's not a function, if you set var x in here, this variable gets hoisted, and it's visible throughout the page, and everything is fine. You have no problems, okay? Let is different. What kind of scope is let? It's block scope. Block scope, what that means,
Less instead of var.
yeah, if we change these to let, this is no longer going to come out to 5. What's going to happen to it? Exactly, you're going to get a reference error. Because basically what block scope means is between these curly braces, like my eyeball, there we go. You get visibility, but only between the curly braces, okay? So that includes if blocks, while loops, all that type of stuff, right? Your visibility is only between those braces. Cool. This one will be a 2-part question and worth 2 points. I guarantee it. What is the scope for const?
I think it was similar to var.
You say it's global? What did you say?
I think it was similar to var.
Anybody else want to give another guess? So const is block scope. Works the same way as let. It was actually released at the same time as let. Const is block scope, but it has one other major attribute to it. Does anybody know what the other major attribute to const is?
You're not able
Don't
to
change.
manipulate it.
Exactly. It's known as immutable. Okay, so it's immutable, cannot be changed. And then last, what is the scope of X? Global. And it is truly global. And the reason why it's truly global is because if I take X off of here, and I take X off of here, right, I will get 5. Outside of the function, outside of the block. Because it's global scoped. It literally gets hoisted to the top of the page and becomes globally scoped. If you had difficulty with this on your test, and you have a cell phone, which most of you do, take a picture of it. Because it will definitely be on the test. I can guarantee that. Okay? I'll leave it up there. Alrighty. We don't need all that stuff though. So we're using const, which means it's immutable. It also means it's block scoped, but because we're defining it at the top of the page, it's going to be available to any blocks as we go down through the page. Unless I redeclare it, Can I redeclare it? No, I can't because it's a const value. I cannot redeclare it. It's stuck. All right, cool. Now we're going to actually use this URL and we're going to go fetch the data. And we're going to do this in two pieces. One, I want to make sure it works. So I'm going to open up my control panel here so that I have it. And I'm going to move it over a little bit so I can see what I'm doing.
Make sure that you don't get that corner.
Exactly. I want to check to make sure I don't get the CORS error. So I'm going to write my fetch here. So fetch. And then fetch takes 2 arguments, but we've only ever used 1 so far, and that's just the URL. The other argument, in case you're curious, is for headers, if you want to actually transmit headers within your request. You can. Okay. I didn't get a CORS error. There's no big blast of error there. If there was, then this would fail. I can actually test that. I'm just going to tack on a number. Oh, it let it happen. I don't know why.
Probably just as the way
Cool, whatever.
Bitly works.
Yeah, it's probably just like,
Redirecting to a different page.
it might even be redirecting behind the scenes to a 404 page. So I wouldn't even see it. Either way, I'm confident that we're okay. We can actually test to make sure that we are okay. Fetch returns a very cool thing. It returns a fulfilled promise, right? We talked about this last week.
Should we link the JavaScript to our index page?
What's that?
Did we link the JavaScript file to our index page? Did we do the source?
If you link, it will return back your source. Yeah.
I mean, did we do it in our index page now, or
No, you're linking up to your data.json file
yeah.
that you have. Yeah.
Did we do it? Okay.
If you were to put your index page or any other page in there, it will actually return back your page source code. That's usually what it returns back.
In our index page, did we link this main.js file?
You forgot to
Did we link it?
You forgot to link the index.
I see what you're saying. Now I know what's happening. It's been a long ass day, dude. I've been out since 4:45, and it's been a long day. All right, underneath template on your index page, yes, it would very much help if we linked the damn file. Main.js. There we go. Oh, there we go. There's my CORS error, Alex.
Oh,
I think it's because I have multiple JSON files sitting up on my Netlify. And one of them doesn't actually have a CORS issue. Actually, I think Alex might be incorrect. I think because Bitly isn't returning the appropriate headers within its redirect, I'm getting the CORS issue. But if I use the actual address, I won't get the CORS issue. And I can test that. If I go back to the main.js file, I'm going to change this out with the original address. Yep, sure enough. I don't get the CORS issue. So it looks like it has a lot to do with the redirect. So what happens in a redirect, in case you're curious? When we go to Bitly, right, it goes off to Bitly. Bitly's server evaluates the address that we sent, does a lookup, then it literally sends the request off to our server, right? Our server's like, yeah, I've got GCS McKinnon, blah, blah, blah. And then it sends the response back through to Bitly, and then Bitly sends the response back through to us. The headers that we send here are probably getting stopped here and not coming back to us. Bitly instead is sending its headers. And we need our headers because our headers are the ones that say to allow the origin, right? So if Bitly's overriding that, we're not getting back the appropriate response. So that's the issue there.
but finding that big URL, you could just give us the Bitly link.
and that'll redirect us straight to that page, and we could grab it there.
Yeah, you would have to go to the page. Yeah, you could type in this bit.ly address, which would navigate you to my page, then copy the URL and paste that in. That would definitely be, you're right, Alex, that would definitely be easier than doing that way. But it does kind of suck that the bit.ly wouldn't work. That would be cooler if the bit.ly works. The short URL system that I built will transfer the headers appropriately from the original response back, but I guess bit.ly doesn't do
How
that.
much you say that was? $1,000 a month?
It's $1,000 a month for the GShift platform at its basic level. Yeah. I mean, you could always haggle. But, all right, so now that we've got our request back, it gets returned. Fetch returns something called a promise. It returns a fulfilled promise, actually. And what the fulfilled promise basically means is that I am done. I have done my duty. I have done what I have to do. I now have something for you. What do you want to do with this thing? So in order to get a hold of that and work with it, we're going to use a method. We used it last week. Does anybody remember the name of that method? .then. So we'll use .then. .then takes one argument. It's the same argument that most JavaScript methods take. It's a callback, right? So we'll just put in a callback in here. Function. Okay. Like I said, fetch, when it fulfills the promise, it's actually going to return back a response. That response gets passed to our anonymous function here, our callback. If we want to get a hold of that response and actually do something with it, we have to give the function an argument. So we're going to give it an argument called response. You can call it literally whatever you want. You could call it I like cats. Doesn't really matter. It's just a variable name. And if we want to just make sure everything is still working, we can console.log that response. And we can see we have a response over here. We can click the little arrow, and it shows us everything that's in here. But you'll notice all the properties in here, if we click, we don't actually have the body yet. We have a readable stream for the body, but we don't actually have any information for the body. That's because we need to do something with response. Response will actually return a promise as well. So we can return response and then do another .then and catch whatever it returns. Next semester, when you guys are back from your co-op and you take advanced server-side, we're going to use a library called Axios, which actually makes this a lot simpler. You don't wind up with multiple thens because it's just one call and then you deal with it. But this one, we're going to have to actually write return response. And I want to return the response as a certain format. So I'm going to use the handy JSON method to do that. Make sure you don't put semicolons after the fetch or after this then. What we're doing right now is called chaining, which means this method fires off. When it returns, it will immediately return whatever its return result is to the next method that's chained to it. So that's what the dot is doing. It's chaining it to this method here. When we get the next one, we're going to dot after it, which will chain this return response and pass it to it as well. You can do this in most object-oriented programming languages. We're going to add another .then. We're going to add another function. We're going to give it an argument so it can shove its information into it. And I'm going to console log it out. And if everything is copacetic, you should get the Bob's Bait and Tackle Shop data structure. And this is true for any client-side fetch. It's also true if you're using Node and you're doing fetch with Node. Yeah.
That is our cross or using request.
Yeah. So you're using your data string then? I would just recommend using my address so we don't have to try to solve it. Yeah. You can do what Alex suggested. Go to the bit.ly address in your browser, and then that will redirect you to this really long-ass address, and then just copy and paste it. So now that you've got that, we're going to work with it. But before we do that, I think what we'll do is we'll go and grab all like the necessary HTML pieces that we need and bring them back into our page just to make life a little simpler for us. So I'm going to shrink this back to a half size again. I'm going to close out my console because I don't need it anymore. Write a nice little comment above this. Fetching da data. Go. I'm going to take my index.html. I'm going to shove it over to this side over here so that I can see all the different pieces in it. And I need a few things, right? I want the company name. I want the street address information. I'm also going to need the featured products section, the slogan, and the products section. And then I also want this template. So I need a whole bunch of different pieces from this. There's a few different ways we could do this. I think we'll do it the hard way first for the first one, and then we'll do it the easy way as we go through. So I only have one H1 on the page, which if you're, doing good Googles, then you will only ever have one H1 on the page because multiple H1s will create like SEO issues. So you only want one H1 for good Googles. So let's write a comment. Grab an HTML elements all day. There we go. And these can all be stored in const because they're never going to change. And I'm going to call this company name. And you're going to do this quite a bit during your tests, writing query selector. And the selector is just either a class, an ID, a tag, or even an attribute selector. It's basically, it is just CSS selectors, right? So if you've written CSS selectors, it's not hard to figure this out. You just use a CSS selector to actually select the H1. Because the H1 is just sitting in an H1 tag, I'm just going to use the H1 tag because it's just simple to do that. The street address is a little harder because we didn't actually name off each of the pieces. We could do that now. We could go through and name them, but you know what? For the heck of it, why bother? We'll just use const. I'm going to write street address 1 equals document.query selector. Query selector. Actually, that's going to be an interesting one, isn't it? I'm going to give that section an ID, just to make my life a little easier. And I'm just going to write address in it. Then over here, I can just grab the address. That's going to be so annoying, actually. Might as well commit. We'll use inth child then to grab the first one. I'm feeling doubt that that actually worked. What's that?
Press the next.
Let's see if it actually worked. It returned back an object. Nope.
It should
Yeah, we got an invalid selector.
shouldn't it be one colon before nth child?
Yeah, maybe it is just 1 and not 2. Yep, there you go. We got it. Nice. Cool, that actually worked. Which is good. So now we can just duplicate that and use that for the other ones. All right, we'll duplicate that one, change that to address 2, and it'll be inth child 2. Nope, not 3, 2. Numbers are hard. And I'm going to grab the city. The city is a little different. It's
the third p tag, and the first span. There we go. That's a long selector. And province will be the second span. You want to make it real easy on yourself, what you could do is just go and add classes to each one of them, or IDs, and definitely make it a little simpler. Now I'm going to do myself a favor and just duplicate these. And then I'm going to change this out to 4, and this one out to 4. The two p tag ones. Then that'll grab the fourth paragraph tag and these two pieces inside. Oh, and the variable name, obviously. To country and postal code. All right, that might take a second for you to type out, so I'll leave that up there.
Now you can definitely see the benefits of naming your fields, because that's going to be absolutely torture if somebody comes along and moves any of this information around. Because if they move it around, it's not going to sync up, our selectors are going to break, and we're going to have problems. This is usually the reason why we use IDs or why we use classes, to avoid that issue.
Or maybe nobody should mess with your work.
Happens all the time. All the time. You will likely do that yourself. When you guys are on co-op, you'll mess with somebody's work, and it will cascade like a butterfly effect, and you'll break a whole whack of crap.
No respect.
Happens all the time.
All right, so after we get all the address information, we're going to need these 3 sections right here. Actually, we need 4 things. So I'm going to do myself a favor, and I'm just going to double click them. If you double click them, they should highlight.
And how many are you using Visual Studio Code? Like VS Code. Okay, so VS Code, if you're on a Windows machine, you have to hold the Alt key down. If you're on a Mac, you have to hold, no, it's Option, okay? Which is essentially the Alt key. If you're in Sublime, it's Control if you're on Windows and Command if you're on Mac, okay? But
Basically, you want to double click and select one, hold down Command or Control or Option, depending on which IDE you're using. Double click the next one. Now you'll notice you'll have 2 cursors blinking. Double click the next one. Now you should have 3 cursors blinking. And then double click the last one, and now you should have 4 cursors blinking. So you should have selected featured product, slogan, products, and product template.
this is to make your life very quick and very easy. Once you've done that, Command-C, Control-C, copy, whatever you do to copy. And that will take all 4 of them, copy them to the clipboard, and immediately separate them all 4 with new line characters.
Can you go through the
Process again.
shortcuts?
Yep. So what IDE are you using?
Sublime.
Sublime? Okay. And you're on a Windows machine? So you're going to double click on one of these and not touch any shortcut yet. You're just going to double click so it's highlighted.
It's highlighting everything.
When you double click, it highlights everything?
Yeah. Like I'm clicking on the line number there.
No. Don't click this.
Okay.
On the word itself. Oh, yeah, you can't really see my cursor. It's kind of pretty invisible. But you're just going to go over top of the word and then double click the word. And that will select the word.
Okay.
Okay.
What were we selecting?
For you, it will be control. So hold down.
What were we selecting?
Slogan is featured product is the first one.
Yeah.
Next one will be slogan. So you'll hold control and double click on slogan, and then control and double click on products, and then control and double click on product template. And then for you, Control C to copy it to clipboard. Once you've done that, you're going to come over here into the main.js file. Put your cursor there. And you're going to paste. And it should paste.
If you did it correctly, I'll paste all 4 of them. But the coolness hasn't even remotely begun.
The coolness lies in click beside the featured product so that you put a cursor there. hold down Command, Control, or Option, click beside slogan, click beside products, and click beside product template. And you should have 4 cursors blinking. All 4 cursors at the same time beside your 4 things. Now, I deliberately name my variables the same name as my IDs so I can do shit like this. Const. There we go. I've got const on all 4 of them. If you're on a Mac, you can hit Command and the right arrow key, and that will put you at the end of the line. If you're in Windows, you should be able to hit Control and the right arrow key, and that should put you at the end of the line. You should still have 4 blinking cursors. Equals document.query selector and some brackets. Now this is where it gets really cool. Quote characters, hashtags, Command or Control V, and it should paste all 4 of those things in their proper location. Now, some people have issues in Windows where it screws them over and literally pastes the 4 things 4 times. But otherwise, you get cool stuff like that. Then Control or Command and the right arrow key, which will put you at the end of the line, and your semicolon. And there you go. You just typed 4 query selectors all at the same time. It's cool, eh? Did it not work?
No. It
Oh.
worked.
You just wanted to drop the mic moment?
Just, why didn't I do that before?
Yeah, it's super, super handy. Multi-cursors are super, super handy.
And yet, in some development environments, the shortcuts are different.
Yeah, like RubyMine, PHP Storm are different. There's a whole bunch. VS Code, if you have an instructor who uses Sublime like me, what you can do is there's a plugin you can download for VS Code that turns the shortcut keys to Sublime shortcut keys. So all the shortcuts are the same.
But in Java, multi-cursor is Control-Shift and
And which IDE are you using? Eclipse?
IntelliJ.
IntelliJ, yeah. And then you get to Visual Studio when you do C++, and there's no multi-cursor.
Yeah.
It's gone.
Just,
No, but
Microsoft has to make everything hard.
I mean, like, what are you doing? Because you have a platform that takes 6 gigs of my operating system to download, so what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, if I don't get multi-select, what's taking up 6 gigs of hard drive space? Sublime takes up, I think, like 17 megs or something like that.
Fucking getting stuff from Visual Studio onto something like GitHub is a fucking chore.
Yep.
They have their own SQL environment.
Yeah, MS SQL. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot of, yeah. I'm not a big fan of Microsoft. Also not a big fan of Apple either.
Even that is just like, how the fuck do you get it set up?
Yeah. It can be a nightmare. All right, so now that we've got all of our elements, that's everything. That's all of the elements we need. We don't need any more elements. Yay us. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a callback function. And the reason why we're creating a callback function is because JavaScript is asynchronous. JavaScript, once again, is asynchronous. When I make a request for data from another server or anything like that, JavaScript's like, cool, dude, got your back. Gonna go get some shit for you. So off JavaScript goes. But meanwhile, my application's like, I'm not waiting. And it keeps going. It keeps going line by line by line by line, which means when the data comes back and when I'm ready to use it don't necessarily happen at exactly the same time. So in order to prevent what's known as a race condition, which is basically I'm trying to access data before data is ready, what we use is a callback, which basically says the data is ready, now I'm going to call this function, and I have the data, so I'll pass it to it. You've done callbacks. You guys have been doing callbacks for the last 13 weeks. So you already know how this kind of works. It's not as complex as the callback question we wrote on the midterm. It's a lot simpler. We're going to first create a named function. So we're going to first use a comment, and we're going to say callback saying we's got the data. And call it whatever you want. I'm just going to call it we's got data. It's going to need an argument so that the data can get passed into it, which I'm just going to call it data. And just to make sure that this thing works, we'll just console log the data for now. Now, we haven't called it yet, and if you were to call it right now, you'll just get undefined because data doesn't actually have any definition, right? And if you were to pass something to data, it would just spit it out just the same way. But we're going to take this function, and we're going to give it as the callback to the then, right? You know where the then up further up here? Let's scroll up just to refresh your memory. This thing here, then. This currently has a function inside of it, right? That function is a callback function that we're using. And what's happening is the response up here is returning this little data chunk, and it's getting passed in here. We're going to simplify this and just pass our we's got data function to it. So, out of curiosity, is that correct syntax? No, it's not. Why is it not correct?
But it's a method call.
That's right, it's a method call. This is actually going to call the method and return something in here. And at this point, it'll probably be undefined. So it'll return undefined in here. Then it's going to be like, cool, undefined is not a function definition. What the hell are you doing? So it doesn't know what to do with it. We only want the function definition. So let's get rid of these guys. There. That's all we want. If you save and you've got live server, or you hit refresh, you should see the Bob's Bait and Tackle Shop data structure. Because nothing's really changed. It's basically the same thing that we wrote before, just now we named it and put it further down. Function definitions tend to trip people up. The big difference between a function definition and a function, if I show you in the console, you guys can see that? It's kind of low on the screen there. Here, I'll clear the screen. Okay, there we go. I'll just move that up a little bit. There you go. So I'm going to spit out the function definition. We's got data. And I'm not going to add the closing parentheses on the end of it. You'll notice that that is the exact syntax that we wrote inside our file. If you scroll down to where we wrote it, it's exactly the same code that's right there.
It's also the same
Identical
code
syntax.
that we had before replacing it with we's got data.
That's true. It is, just because we basically rewrote it. But yeah, so that is the exact same code there. If I write we's got data and I add the execution operator to the end of it, which are the parentheses, that tells the interpreter I want to take that function definition and I want to execute it. I want it to run. And we'll get undefined because there's nothing in it, right? Function definitions is just the syntax being passed. And then whatever it is can use it and call it on its own. When we call it with these operators, the execution operators, that is actually invoking the function. And incidentally, you can do that in PHP. You can do it in Ruby. You can do it in C++ as well. There's a lot of languages that support this. So if you're like really hardcore programmer and love programming, live and breathe programming, callbacks are completely available in most languages and can be extremely powerful for doing some really crazy cool stuff. Especially if you get into things like threading and things like that. You can get into some pretty cool stuff. All right. We may have different ideas of what's cool and what's not. So I know that I've got Bob's Bait and Tackle Shop, so I don't need this console log anymore. Actually, you know what? I'm going to leave it there because I can use it as a reference. So I know what's all in there. And I want to change the company name out. So that's easy. So to change the company name, changing company. Wow. English is hard today. Company name. I'm going to use the variable I named. And company name is currently linked to this H1 inside our Jumbotron. How do I change that string? How do I change this string right here? Wait. Sorry?
Text content,
Not subtext. You're on the right track though.
text content.
Yes. Text content.
Text content. Okay, we're not done yet though. Text content, is it a method or a property? Property, yes. It's a property. So if I want to change its value, what operator do I have to put beside it? Equal sign. There we go. Cool. And now, trick question. What's the name of our object that we're working with? Our JSON object, what do we call it? It is JSON, but that's not its name. We gave it a variable name. We gave it a variable name. Data. We called it data. The way we know that is because we're passing our object into here, and this is the same name. It's data. Okay, next trick question. How do I access the company name from the data object? Exactly. Data.company name. Bam. Gonna save, and if we did it all correctly, company name should change to Bob's Bait and Tackle Shop. Cool. We're not done. I have so much more stuff to do. Let's see if our street address information actually worked. So we can do the same thing with street address. Street address 1.text content equals data dot street address 1, right? And if that works, bam, the street address changed for me. Cool, that's good. Let's try number 2. I'm going to just change these numbers out to 2. Save it. Nice, I've got unit number 24. Let's do it again. Change these out to the city. Nice. The province. Nice. The country. Yep. And the postal code. Cool. I didn't get a postal code back. Let's go see why. Maybe data.postal code is not what I think it is. Do I have a postal code? Oh, I don't have a postal code. That's why. Can't access postal code if we don't have a postal code. Now we just got Canada dot nothing. You know what? Why don't we do ourselves a favor? Just above postal code, data is an object. It's a literal object. How would I add a postal code to the data object? Anybody want to take a guess? Data dot postal code equals my postal code. Bam! Now it's there. Cool. We've accessed data from it. We've created new data. Then we access this data. I mean, this is a bit redundant, right? Because we're adding the property here, and then we're just assigning the property. We could literally just move this to here instead of going through that whole hassle. But I mean, what's the fun in that, right? We need to change out the slogan with the slogan that's in the system. So I'm going to write slogan.text content equals data.slogan. Bam. That's a hardcore slogan. I find it funny how many people don't actually read what they're writing to the screen.
Some people do. You get smirks.
I had one guy on Tuesday just full out laugh when he read it, but
Oh, this is coming from the API.
it is. Yeah, it's our JSON block that we have from the API. So everything we get is from the API right now. So everything we've done has been pretty easy, right? Changed out the text content. That's old hat. We've done that for the last 13 weeks. We've changed the text content since week 2, right? Actually, I think we did it in week 1 even. We've been changing text content all the time. But now we're going to do something a little different. We need to grab that HTML template, turn it into an actual HTML element, and then shove it into the page. So in order to do that, we should iterate through our products list. And I don't think we'll add our featured product. I think we'll just spit out the products for now. So that way we can end at least a little bit earlier. So in data.products, we have our product, okay? But before we do that, I want to create a, no, we need to do it, yeah, we need to do it at the same time. So we're going to do data.products, right? And I can do 2 different loops on data.products. Data.products is an array. What are the 2 loops, the 2 iteratives that I have available to me to run on data.products? There's 2. There's a for each, yep. And what's the other one? Actually, it's 3, technically. 4. 4 we can run. What's that?
What's the question?
What are the iterators? What are the repetition structures that I could use with the data.products, which is an array? There's 4 possible ones. Alex said for each. For of, that's the other one. That's the other tough one. And then there's 2 more that you could run as well. You could run a standard for loop, right? But you'd have to check. What would you have to check? The length, exactly. And then the other one you could do is a while loop, but you would need some way to exit. So either you'd want to pop them off or something like that, right? But yeah, we'll use the for of. I really like that structure. For. There we go. Okay, let's finish off the syntax inside here. First, I need, what do I need? Data.products is coming from data.products. That's our array that we're iterating through. What else do I need inside this? Yeah, a variable, like a throwaway variable. And we might as well scope it, right? So it doesn't wind up getting set as a global. Anybody want to disagree with calling it product? I think that's fine, eh? There we go. Cool. Now that we've got that, what I want to do is I want to create a new product, populate it with the new text, and then append it to the product's thing, HTML element. Yes, Alex?
What's the difference between for each and for of again?
For each, believe it or not, underneath the hood, for each calls a for loop on an array anyways. But basically the idea is that for each is a method that's on an array. So the element gets passed into a callback on for each, and then it's executed. To me, it's not as clear as a for of. I find for ofs much clearer to see what's going on. The for each would look like this. Not nearly as clear to me. I find the other one much easier to read. But. All right, so in here, we're going to first create an element. So I'm going to call it, I don't know what I'm going to call it. Let's just call it ProL. That works. And how do I create an element? Hiccup. Document. Create element. Yep. What's the argument it takes? Does anybody know? It's a tag. So we just give it div, because that's what we want to create. Nope, actually I did this totally wrong, and I apologize, so scratch that. Keep you on your toes. All right, no, because we already created it. We created the template thing. Now I just want to import it. So I always have to look this up. HTML5 template. Because I can never remember the stupid syntax for it. Go. Yep, blah, blah, blah. Yep, cool. Where are you doing the JavaScript thing? That was totally unhelpful. It's an MDN. Let's try that again. Let's go to MDN, HTML5 template. There it is. That's what I want. Right, it's document.import node. So we want document.import node. We're going to change ProL to content. Nope. Oh, right. Sorry. I apologize. Change that back to ProL. Import node. This is going to be the product template that we created. We want to access a property called content on it. And then the second argument is true. True just basically means recursively crawl through that template and grab every single child node of it and copy everything and bring it back and paste it into this thing as a copy. And this is a copy, not a reference. It literally copies this whole object and pastes it back. Then I'm going to change out the text content. So we're going to do ProL.textContent. Content equals. Nope, that's not what I'm going to do. Why am I doing that? That's silly. Hold on. We need our HTML. I am dead ass tired here. All right. Now we're going to do a query selector. So we're doing the scoped querying, right? So ProL would be this template, and then we're actually scoping through, and I want to grab the name field. There we go. And then I'm just going to call text content using chaining. Make that equal to the product, which is coming from this variable, dot name. Cool. And I'm going to keep doing that, ProL dot query selector. And this one would be, yeah, we'll do the details. So I'm just going to actually target the weight directly. Weight. Did I spell that right? Yep. Dot text content is going to be equal to product. And we have to chain a couple of times, right? Because one, we have to dive into dimensions, and then to weight. And we're going to do that 2 more times. This one will be height. Nope, sorry, this one will be width. This one will be height. Duplicate it 1 more time. And this one will be length. Yeah, no, I got it. Yeah, the weight one is wrong.
Okay.
The weight one isn't product dimensions weight, it's just product.weight. The other 3 are product dimensions. There we go.
What's the difference?
Wait, it's not that dimension.
Weight's not a dimension.
And where is it in the JSON file?
In the JSON file, it's like in the main level of product.
Okay.
Yeah. Whereas the dimension ones are product, then dimensions, then weight, right? So it's nested down. And then last but not least, we need the price. So ProL dot query selector price dot text content will be equal to product dot price. And then last, we can just duplicate that one, change out price to SKU, and that would be it. That should be all of them. But we're not done yet. This isn't a part of our DOM yet, is it? It's like, it's a fragment. It's just a document fragment sitting in memory and has no existence yet. It's waiting to be birthed into our HTML page to be as existential as possible. Let's birth this thing. All right, so we're going to, well, it's a little less glamorous. We're just going to append it. So using products, which was the element we selected, we're going to do append, and we're going to append ProL, and then save it. And if everything is good, no, we get a big blook on line 42. It's mad at me. Product template.content true, yeah. uncaught in property and promise cannot set property text content of null, which means the way we read this is we go backwards, right? It's basically, I had this conversation the other day actually. It's basically text content is where we start. Text content is a property. Null would be the HTML element we think we have and that we're working with. So based on that logic, that means that this is messed up. Something's wrong with that. So step one for us, when we want to troubleshoot these things, step one is to console log pro-l and see if we actually have anything. Yep, I've got a document fragment. Says div product. Looks like that's okay. So if that's good, and I grab pro-l query selector, so I'm going to try that next. Dot query selector. Oh, I see the problem. I see the problem. What's wrong with my tags? What's wrong with my selector option? They're not classes. Yeah, I didn't type them right. We need dots in front of each of those. Dot. Dot. There we go. It's working. I have things. Lots of things. Now it'd be nice to put these like side by side by side by side. And that's quite easy to do in Bootstrap. In order to do that in Bootstrap, all we need to do is, I feel like modifying the HTML and not the rest of the thing. So beside the div class product, what I'm going to do is write beside it col-4 so that it's a fourth of the column size, right? So I should get 3 of them side by side by doing col-4. And is products inside a row already? Yes, it is. Cool. So I shouldn't have to do anything else. Just write col-4 beside it. And then if that worked in your browser when you refresh, they should be side by side. And they're not, for whatever reason. Not entirely sure why. Jerks. Why are you not side by side? I mean, I could write SM beside it. Maybe that'll fix it. Nope. Yeah, I'm not sure why it won't go side by side. That's weird. You should go side by side. You should want to go side by side. Let's try that. Man, nope. I can't get them to go side by side. Not sure why. Yep. Must be. Where is the products, actually? Oh, because we're nesting them in a column is why they're acting up. Yeah. That's not a big deal. You know what? I'm going to take that off of there. Like so. And is it... There's a Bootstrap thing to actually display those as flex. This is all gravy at this point. We're basically done. Get Bootstrap, documentation, flex, D to flex. All right, let's try that. Going to remove this as col-12 and do D dash flex and see if that works. Yep, there we go. Now they're all side by side. They look a little absurd. I mean, good enough, right? Okay, I'm happy. I mean, it's not Tuesdays. They had color to theirs, but I think it's good enough. Are you guys happy? Okay, cool. So now you can go off to GC Blackboard, log in, Log in. Go to the client-side JavaScript. Go to Labs. Go to Lab 7. And just submit your main.js. That's it. That's all I want. Just the main.js. Go ahead and submit it.
Could you show the last part again?
Yes, I certainly can. Or the HTML. Which one do you want?
HTML.
The HTML? It's this thing that you need. Deflex. No worries.
Can you look here?
Can I look here?
Try to define the document. It's here, but
Yep.
I think it's not saving
You have the import node. Let's go back to your Main.js. Did you get product template? Yeah, you have product template. Scroll down. You have product template.content and true. That's correct. You wrote that correctly. ProL. Okay, console.login ProL. Yeah, just right there. It really is taking its time to get there. Yeah, you've got it. I think. Yeah, look at all the product ones. There you go. Yeah, it should be in there. So go back to your page. Oh, you didn't append. You're missing the append. Here. You need this line. Yeah. And then you'll be good. Oh, yeah. What's that? Okay, so don't worry about it. Go back to your index file. It wants the content meta tag for some reason. Does it load it in Chrome? Yeah, try to load it in Chrome. At the end of the day, to be fully honest, I don't care if it works. You're going to submit it, and I'm going to go through the big laundry list and write 5 points, 5 points, 5 points, 5 points, based on the fact that you submitted it. That was just your Netlify address. Okay. Yeah, I just need the Netlify address, and then you're good to go. All right. We have like 20 minutes. You can either leave, that's totally up to you, and call it an early night, or I am here for any questions that you might have about the test next week. If there's any particular things that you're unsure about, you can ask now. Now would be the best time to ask. If you don't want to ask in front of everybody, that's totally fine. You can always Slack. I'm on Slack like 24/7, so feel free to Slack it as well. That works as well. Does anybody have any questions about the test next week? Anybody have any questions about things that might be on the test next week?
I don't know if somebody already asked, is there multiple choice on this one?
No. No, it's just going to be a 3-hour, practical. That's the word. Yeah. In the same kind of format that we did the last one.
Alright.
Yeah. Oh, did anybody want to take a picture of this thing before I erase it? The scoping thing? You're all confident? You're not going to wrap it in functions?
Already took a picture.
Okay, cool. Hey,
Oh,
I'll wait. Here, I erased some of it.
no, it's fine.
Here you go. Thanks. Can I close this? Is everybody good? Okay. I'm going to assume that that's a yes. Oh, better stop this and